Alrighty, so let's try that again. I just did a 45-minute recording of this, and apparently didn't catch any of the audio. So this gives me the opportunity to be a little bit more concise. This video today is actually a sort of quick review. I haven't got a chance to sit through it yet, but it's a quick review of Douglas Kent's Rogue Hojojutsu. Just like the first time I recorded this, I kept saying Hojojutsu. It's Hojojutsu. Rogue Hojojutsu. I used to say Tori no Jitsu because it was easier on the English tongue, but in any case, so some people are quite familiar with Douglas Kent's work. Some aren't so much. I hate to compare his old work to this work because it's two very different projects, and he did a lot of things for different reasons in different ways. Firstly, he's most well known, at least in my life, for his publications on the subject of shibari, and particularly his complete shibari books. These two guys, which have been increasingly difficult to get a hold of over the past while. I was just reading this morning as to why that was, and simply shipping issues, and the publisher got bought out by someone who didn't feel like upholding any existing orders. So it delayed a lot of things. People thought it was completely out of print. The Amazon prices skyrocketed. I got mine for $15 to $20 a pop. But in any case, complete shibari that he's known for is an exceptional introduction to shibari. In the alternative community, there is some criticism against it, but most importantly, Kent's most well known for being exceptionally thorough. I'm only going to selectively pick some pictures out of here because there is a considerable amount of toplessness on the female models, and YouTube's not a big fan of that. But he's known for making exceptional displays of various knots and ties, pages of them, and of course things like the placement on the body, how to apply the ties. There's usually considerable amount of discussion on safety and procedure, and yeah, exemplary work on this sort of document. And then a tremendous amount of solid content. The first book was on ground ties. The second book was on suspensions, and it was highly technical work. Anybody new to the community, I usually direct them towards that. So this newest work, Rogue Hojojutsu, this lovely guy here, as you can see, it's a little bit more cartoony. The previous work had, in the Complete Shibari series, had all real models. And it just, for me, it lessens that distance between the illustrations you see in some densho and what you see here. So when you're applying it, your brain doesn't have to comprehend the difference between an illustration and the actual thing. The learning curve, I find, is just much better. Here, however, it's all done on comic book characters, and I mean like all of it on comic book characters. This is the most notable feature of this book, sadly, is that it's all on characters. It takes a lot out of the credibility of Kent's work because he did put a tremendous amount of work into this. He's spent, I don't even know how long, but he's one of the few that has published content now derived from Fujita Seiko's Zukai Hojojutsu publication, which I've been translating for a few years, and of course, every time I mention it, I have to point out life just gets in the way. I haven't given up on it. The work's not too hard. Most of it's modern English, or modern Japanese. It's going to happen. It's a bucket list item. It's going to happen. And this past year, there was a tremendous amount of bucket list items I got out of the way. It's coming. In fact, the original book is right here. So this seems to be Douglas Kent's primary source for this subject, though it does show that he regarded quite a bit of other content, particularly English content I see, but in any case, this is the sort of stuff we normally deal with for illustrations. Not the greatest, most detailed stuff, but still there was more effort put into the illustrations showing rope placement, what goes over and under what. Whereas in the case of Rogue Hojojutsu, so he did it again, you'll see he's got a methodology, but it's not explicit. We've got dots representing the knots. Now, of course, this cross-references to these diagrams down here that exemplify what sort of knots are being used. However, I find it better to have a complete picture and then the details, not the details segmented from the pictures. So it's a pet peeve of mine. I know already there's quite a few reviews out there against the use of these cartoon characters, but what are you going to do, right? Actually, he has put forth a official reasoning as to why he did exactly this, and I will read that out in a second here. Mr. Douglas Kent. Because there has been a couple people poking and provoking him on why he chose to use cartoon characters or comic book characters like this. And yeah, again, I'm someone who's not particularly impressed by that. I hate to have it shape the experience, but it is, in essence, a picture book or an illustration book, and what are you going to look at but illustrations? His official description of this here says that each of the characters in Rogue Hojojutsu was hand-drawn, scanned, cleaned up, and colored. Then rope was painstakingly added. The average time per image was about 8 hours using a string of programs. Rogue Hojojutsu contains 421 images. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And that's a total of 91 ties, according to this. So super exciting. Like it's monumental work, especially in a 100-page book like this. Is not a big book. It's 100 pages. It's like 98 pages. One individual here asked, why the monsters? First thing through my mind when I saw the cover of this, I was like, no. It made me hesitate as to whether or not I wanted to buy it. And in the end, I ended up saying, you know what, there's going to be content in there. I'm a big fan of Kent's older work. Has to be on my shelf. So, boom, bought it, that's that. So, Douglas Kent responded to this comment saying, most Hojojutsu books use generic martial arts guys. It is a martial arts book. It's visually dull, but also makes distinguishing sets of ties difficult. Here's a book of distinguished ties. I mean, they're all self-distinguished. Some are leg ties, some are wrist ties, some are box ties, whatever. And I can understand that this one, most of it's upper body ties, so it can start to make it difficult to look at. I'm going to simply say it's only difficult to look at. He continues on to say, the bad guys in Rogue Hojojutsu give the book a more distinctive look, but also helps distinguish sets of ties from each other. It also helps set the tone. Rogue Hojojutsu isn't your typical martial arts Hojojutsu book. For English readers and speakers, there isn't a lot of typical Hojojutsu books. In fact, there's a couple PDFs I've published. There's another book from Christian Russo, which I only just acquired today, the same day as I acquired this, so my hands are full for a while. But in any case, if the primary source documentation for the ties is going to be Fujita Seiko's Zukai Hojojutsu, then this is what we call a Zuihitsu. It's like a sort of encyclopedia. The content itself is fairly dry. It's not written from the angle of experience and personal practice. It's written from the angle of a collector. It's like the Bansen Shukai. It's a collection of information, not personal experience application put into words for the purpose of transmitting knowledge. And that's kind of one of the reasons that took some of my zeal out of working on Fujita Seiko's books, pretty much all of them. But that and The Hojojutsu one's the only one that's not published yet. I really have to get on that. So, in any case, that's a big distinctive feature of this book, sadly. It should be the quality of the content in it, and from what I can see so far, it is exceptionally quality content. But those illustrations. So I'm going to try and brush over that, and I'm going to do that by going through the contents. Alrighty, so one of the cool things here is that Douglas Kent's books, the layout isn't orthodox, but at least for me, it's effective. So, for example, one of the table of contents is all the ties. They've got matching page numbers under them. Up here, there's the different particular knots and whatnot, or diagrams that index them, and underneath those is a page number that directs you where to find that. He elaborates in quite a lot of literature in the beginning. I'm actually quite surprised by this. I'm a little bit critical of most people's academic backgrounds that aren't already established in the martial arts community academically and haven't published a tremendous amount of work on things. So I'm already looking at this firstly as cartoon characters, and then a guy that hasn't established himself academically yet, though in practice he's done excellent stuff already. So I'm like on the fence there. I'm like, okay, academic work, and I haven't read this yet, frankly, but it's been sitting on my table for 2 hours. But he starts on about the introduction of the book itself, about Rogue Hojojutsu. I haven't gotten into that, haven't read it yet. That'll probably answer most of my questions about the book. Hojojutsu and takedowns, history of Hojojutsu in Japan, which is hyper summarized, a brief history of Japan. It goes on for quite a few paragraphs. It's hyper summarized. Overview of the Tokugawa period. That's kind of an important period in the development of Hojojutsu. Most of Fujita Seiko's work would have, one, not been published, and two, would not exist the way it does in that time period if it weren't for the developments made in that time period. He has an enormous section on the samurai, which I thought was interesting how much he elaborated. Like, it's here, 3 columns. Oh, I can't see that here. The lighting's changed since the first time I tried this video. So it's 4 columns of content on that. Then the Tokugawa era police system, what laws were enforced, why was Hojojutsu forms kept secret? Lots of reasons about that, and I'll likely elaborate at some point. Does Hojojutsu not use knots to avoid shaming the captive? Oh, this is under the myths and exaggerations. So, does it not use knots? Not use knots? Anyone that's looked at the diagram can straight out say, isn't that a knot? That's a knot. Those are knots. They're using knots. So it'll be interesting to read through that. Were specific rope colors used for different seasons and crimes? Pretty late in the history of Hojojutsu that started happening, but yes. Were Hojojutsu prisoners tied facing certain directions for seasons? Again, a later development, although it references a lot of classical resources and ideas in regards to the why and how. This one kind of surprised me. Did ninja wear black? Why it's referencing the ninja in this is beyond me, completely beyond me. Were Hojojutsu forms inescapable? I would like to say pretty much nothing's inescapable, especially in the case of something organic and flexible like rope. Was Hojojutsu a monoculture? That's an interesting question, and I look forward to looking into that one. Were katana superior swords because the metal was folded? Is this about myths about samurai or myths about Hojojutsu? Because this is, in my opinion, absolutely not relevant. In fact, bruising over the 4 or 5 paragraphs here, I see no mention of rope at all in there. But it's there. Hey, content, whatever. Was blowfish poison put on rope? That'd be nuts. I'm curious about that one because I personally never heard that. Apparently it's from Don Angier. Was Hojojutsu important to samurai? In my previous attempt to do this video, I elaborated on that more than need be. I'll probably make a video about that. Were Hojojutsu practitioners highly regarded? Essentially on the battlefield there were specialists. Everyone had a certain expectation to know basic, like high ties. Basic, I mean, like they're not all professional rope arresting guys. Most of them, or many of them, are professional killers. That's a little bit of a different thing there. He goes into safety. Safety is huge, 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 huge. Anytime I've started into any kind of comprehensive content on the subject of Hojojutsu online, I've always started with safety, and then I start to kind of get bored of it, and then drop the project and work with something else. So, yeah, that's important to look at these things. How to reduce risk, breathing emergencies, nerve damage. It's one of the things I always emphasize. A lot of people getting into things like rope bondage and rope arresting techniques, they're concerned about rope burns and circulation. Both of these are relevant, very immediate things, but they pale in comparison to many of the other concerns that people don't realize is a thing. Nerve impingement or compression is kind of the big thing. Obviously, breathing, which should be a concern. They have some actually really good notes here, again with the comic book characters, but they have some really good notes here on how to make some ties safer. Like for example, there's a lot of ties out there that essentially have a slip knot or a noose pull around the neck. You struggle, you choke yourself. That's the idea. In doing demonstrations and whatnot, that's a bit dangerous, and not too many waivers of liability are going to cover you on that. In fact, I don't think any are because it falls under negligence. What I do instead quite often is do things like overhand knots or other non-cinching knots, especially if they're going to be around the throat or any place that circulation is a huge issue that gets bad really quick. A little subsection on then and now, what's changed. I look forward to looking into that. How to wear and carry certain things. Some elaboration on nomenclature and the variations, translations, etc., etc., etc. He's even mentioned here that he's aware of at least 10 abandoned attempts to translate the Zukai Hojojutsu, all with the consistent verdict that significant sections are untranslatable. I haven't come across these sections yet. I'm only about 25% of the way through translating it, but that's most of the thick, dense content is there. I really don't know why it's been such an issue. I honestly don't know why it's been such an issue. I've come across maybe a few things that have given me trouble, and upon further research and reflection, it's usually sorted itself out. In fact, I haven't had to skip over any sections yet in regards to this. Types of rope, preparation of rope, tremendous amount of knots and ties. That's super cool. Okay, so we're just going to jump ahead here because we're already at 18 minutes. So yeah, lots of knots, lots of ties, specifics on how to tie around the wrists. I've elaborated on this in the past in a couple of my workshops. That was a bugger to reverse engineer, and he makes note of that. Some of the ways I do it I feel are safe or safest, not necessarily classical. I haven't necessarily figured out the correct way per each tradition, because again, my primary source is his primary source, but I've also dealt with a number of other densho, some that I've been asked not to talk about, but like around the 9 traditions of the Bujinkan and such, there's some of that. And yeah, some of the sources I have to work off of just aren't explicit or detailed enough for me to reverse engineer it. That's all. C'est la vie. Variations, variations, variations. Form follows the function is what I'd like to say, but in later times in the development of Hojojutsu, it went rather fancy at one point. So yeah, many ties. Some of them do have 2 or 3 illustrations to show a sort of step-by-step walkthrough, but not all of them. I sincerely wish they all did, but I think one of the important parts about learning these sorts of things is the process of reverse engineering and learning it for yourself is one of the important things to the practice. If you just get spoon-fed this shit, then it's shit you're getting spoon-fed. Well, there's some ties in here that I was actually trying to figure out, what in the hell do you do? How do you make it work? And I think this will go a long way in me being able to engineer and understand some of these. Oh, some of the nice things I should point out is, where's a good example of that? With each of the ties, as a researcher myself, this is kind of big in my books, but that's not a good example. Come on, you. Okay, well, whatever, I'll live with it. So, here we have, here we've got the name of the tie. We've got, well, the kanji, the romanji, and here in brackets, Shinkage Jigenryu. So it literally says which tradition it's from. Now, these are being referenced from Fujita Seiko's Zukai Hojojutsu, so, and then this particular one, the name just means that, I don't know, literally, name unknown. And so that's kind of fun because I came across that a few times in Seiko's sort of work, and it's just like, oh yeah, and as you can see here, for each tie, we have, see, it's like step 1, step 2, details of interest, focus camera, in any case. So it's, you know, step 1, step 2, it's kind of interesting that way. And yeah, there's a lot of, where is it here? He does have some footnotes on here in regards to like Shingyoso and subject matter that I've worked with in the past like that. Oh god, get me started on Shingyoso. Some references to where the names come from. Some wonderfully psychotic faces on these guys. Focus. Look at that. Tell you right now, if someone's looking at me with that face, I'm shooting them in the face because no amount of grappling is going to be the answer for me. A little tiny guy like myself. So in any case, it's 100 pages. It comes to about 30 bucks. I'll put a link in the description to in regards to the getting a hold of a copy of that. And yeah, I haven't read it yet, so this review is actually a little bit preemptive, but I look forward to digging into that properly. And yeah, I'm sure it'll inspire some videos and some articles here and there. Right on. In any case, you guys party.